So, just to get started with today, so I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. You all can see me as well, right? Kinu, you can see me on the screen?
Yes,
Okay, because I can't see myself. Okay, so like I was saying, I thought that this time round we're going to do something a bit different. Instead of all this while we've been looking at text and we've been comparing and contrasting without fully really getting to the gist of why we're doing it, right? So for example, I know we looked at short stories separately. Those are one text per session that we were doing, but when we were looking at poetry, we were adopting more of a sort of doing multiple texts together. And I'm sure you guys, maybe that's not the way that you've been taught in your school or your classes. But the reason that I've been doing it that way is because this method of comparison and contrast, basically the comparison of multiple or two or more texts, is always more helpful for us because it helps us to get a bigger picture, a broader view of what we're really studying, instead of just looking at one particular text and trying to analyze that, right? And also, when you go to the exam, when you're actually facing your examinations, you've probably seen through your past papers, you don't usually get one poem to analyze. It's always multiple ones put together. So it's a method of comparing and contrasting that we're doing. So by sort of preparing yourself in this way and by your training your thinking in this way, it helps you when you actually go for the exams. That helps you to sit down and quickly answer the question accordingly as well, right? So first of all, I sent you guys this little document. I hope you had the time to go through it, which was more of the elements of compare and contrast, why we do it, how we do it, and why it's necessary, right? So I'm just going to do an overview today of the importance of comparing texts, why we compare texts in literature, and how we incorporate that and how it comes to play when we're writing what we call a comparative essay. So a comparative essay is essentially the kind of answers that you guys write in your past papers when they ask you to look at multiple texts and put them together and write an answer. That's what you're doing, is essentially writing a comparative essay, right? So moving on, just drawing from the document that I shared with you guys. So why do we compare different texts on the same theme or topic? What is the advantage? What positives are we getting from doing that, right? So basically, we do that to see how different authors explore the same idea. Now, we were talking about the idea of, for example, in different social settings, in different social contexts or historical literary eras, how do same poets handle the exact same topic in different ways, right? So this helps us to understand the theme or the topic more completely and deeply. Instead of just looking at it in one angle or looking at one text and seeing how this writer does it, let's look at how multiple writers does it. How does one person from the, from the Shakespearean era does it? How does a female writer handle the same topic, right? So different ways of doing it. So this also helps us to appreciate different writing styles and the choices that an individual author makes. What sort of different literary choices or creative choices does this particular writer make when they're doing something, okay? And all in all, it makes you a more insightful and critical reader. So that, I would say, that is the primary perk of it, regardless of exams and regardless of how well you do, even though that's important. It helps you become a much better student of literature and a much better critical thinker, right? So that's why we do this. So compare and contrast in a question, essentially it asks you to look at the ways in which different texts could be alike or similar. What are the commonalities that they have? What common ground do they share? But also, how do they differ from each other? Right? Well, because all these points make for very interesting analysis, because they bring up a lot of issues and themes that when we dig deeper as we go into the questions, right? So those are some of the reasons why we do this kind of comparative analysis. So, I've been taking a look at your past papers and I've pulled up some of your past paper questions. And apart from the context questions, which are pretty generally, it's just about context questions are more to do with understanding whether you can place the text in a context. Do you know where this extract or where this excerpt, where it's coming from? Do you know the author? Do you know the relevance of that extract to the bigger text? So that is what context questions generally try to answer. But when you look at essay type question, which is what these are, we know that for novel and drama, obviously because they're huge texts, they are very big, you can't ask a student to compare two massive novels in the same question, so that's not practical. So we don't usually do comparative analysis for the bigger texts, but definitely for short story and for poetry, these kind of questions always pop up. That's the general structure that your past papers take, right? So you have things like discuss the relationship between gender and socioeconomic class in 3 short stories in your syllabus. So again, even though all these questions are worded in different ways, the essence of it is the same. What are they asking you to do? Take 1, 2, 3 different texts, put them together, look at them as a whole. Okay, so even in poetry you can see, so how do different poets critically engage with nationalism? Look at it in 3 different poems. Okay, let me try to exit that and reshare the screen again. Okay, great. So let me backtrack and quickly show you the slides. I've already sent you this. Let me move this guy up there as well. What I was saying was that I already sent you, so this was just essentially the PDF that I had shared with you guys. So to run through that again, since you didn't see the slide before, so why do we compare the different texts? Again, the answers are to see how different authors explore the same idea, to understand the theme or topic more completely and deeply, to appreciate the different writing styles and choices that an author makes, okay? And like I stressed before as well, more than anything, it helps to make you a better reader. It helps to make you a more insightful and critical reader and a critical analyst in general. Okay, so that was the first slide, so we didn't miss a lot. So this is the slide that I was showing you with your past papers. So I was pointing out how your short story has these sort of questions where you're supposed to look at 3 different short stories together. So the shorter the text, the more your syllabus tends to adopt a compare and contrast style. We don't look for the bigger sort of like the bigger texts, we use it for 1 analysis per question. But the shorter texts, like short story and poetry, we always try to adopt this comparative analysis, right? So, for example, now we see over here the what we were talking about. So you take at least 2 to 3 poems and you look at them 1, 2, 3 all together, not one by one, right? So all these words now, they don't get thrown off by how the questions are worded. Sometimes it could be examined, sometimes it could be critically examined, critically analyzed, analysis, like all of these examination, exploration, analysis, all of these words are pointing you to the same thing in a comparative analysis, which is the idea of critical analysis. So critical analysis is taking a text and critiquing it, criticizing it, right, in order to get to the essence of it. So this sort of compare and contrast critical analysis is essentially what leads us to the idea of what we call the comparative essay. Okay, so when we're talking about writing essay style questions or essay style answers, this is what we're talking about, the comparative essay. Okay, so I'm not going to go through this too much because this was in the PDF that I sent you. This is less of before, this is more of the prior work that comes before you actually answer the question, right? This is your preparatory work. This is what you do when you're studying literature to begin with. So first of all, every single text that's in your syllabus, you have to read and understand them individually, okay? But I would tell you, and that's the approach I've been trying to take with you guys in teaching as well so far. I would tell you, when you're doing a particular text, don't only think about that text alone, okay? Which is why when I'm trying to teach you guys as well, while I'm teaching you one poem, I kind of draw parallels with another. Do you remember this one? Do you remember this is what happened in the previous one? What was that author saying? So just train your minds to not look at like in a tunnel vision, not to look at one text, but to think about different aspects of, and I'm not even talking about just books in your syllabus. I will tell you how my brain works when I'm reading a new text for the first time. Say that I'm reading a poem that I've never seen before, and I'm reading this, and while I'm reading it, suddenly my mind is making connections with, oh, like I saw a scene like this in Stranger Things. Weren't they discussing a theme like this in, I don't know, some movie that I watched, right? So different aspects, movies, songs, like song lyrics. Remember once when we were discussing one of the was it, no, it was Evelyn, the short story. So I was talking about numbness, and the song like Linkin Park's Numb, like those lyrics, how they feature in. So try to train your minds instead of just purely looking at literature as a book or a text, or this is something that we're looking at. Try to train your minds to kind of look at the interrelations, like the links, like your mind should become like a sort of mind map and start mapping out little details. So it's when you train your mind to do that it becomes really easy to approach questions like this, right? So as I was saying, as you're going through your texts, read and understand each individually, identify common grounds. Okay, this might be a text from a completely like a Russian author. This might be a text from a Sri Lankan author. What are the similarities? How can we look? Because at the end of the day, literature is a universal theme, right? We don't write in isolation. We don't write about things that nobody has ever heard of before. So what are the common strands in all of these? So identify the common grounds. And obviously, one of the most important things is comparing forms or genres, because as we know, and like I have spoken with you guys before as well, genre features so strongly in the meaning and the structure of a text. For example, poetry has a different way in which it uses rhyme and rhythm and all of the devices in order to bring about a meaning, whereas short story or novel or drama is completely different. So it's always important to look at structure, the form and genre of a text that you're doing. Also, compare the approaches. Okay, how does the author's voice sound? Because a text is ultimately a product of, like we have discussed, it's a product of time. It's a product of the literary era or the context it was in. So how does this author bring about this particular theme, and how is it different to what the other person is doing? And then also compare the language and the details. So techniques, the language, the literary devices, what are the differences? What are the similarities? And it's for this reason that I told you guys to get used to that sort of way of the Venn diagram, because it's very useful in training your brains to think in that way, so that even if when you're at the exam, if you don't have time to be drawing Venn diagrams, at least after some months of doing it at home, when you're not under strict time pressure, your brain will be used to visually think like that. Here's the difference, here's the difference, here's the similarity. So it's like pat, like all the points just come to your brain, okay? So try to practice that. It will be helpful. You will see how it helps you to sort of create your answers and organize as you go, okay? So, which brings us now this idea of compare and contrast, which brings us to what I was speaking about earlier, the idea of the comparative essay, the idea of what is a comparative essay, that this is a type of essay that you definitely, I don't know whether you know that it's the terminology, but this is the kind of essay that you are writing when you write a structured answer for the bigger, not the context questions, but the bigger essay type questions, right? So comparative essay type questions are ones that you examine multiple texts to reveal the connection and contrast. Okay, and they usually consider key concepts such as different themes, there's context, literary era, style, values, all sorts of these different aspects of a literary text. So the use of the comparative essay and why they include this so much in your past paper or your exam papers is because it goes beyond this is text A and this is text B. Instead it looks as text as a whole, as interrelated in things that have relationships to each other. And that's a very good style for you guys to get into in general when it comes to looking at literature, or even in life. I would say this applies to life itself, because it helps you to sort of look away from the tunnel vision of this is thing A and this is thing B. Instead, it makes you realize, these things are actually more connected than I thought. Like, they seem like two completely different things, but they have these interesting elements to them that combine them, right? So usually the key to a strong comparative essay is this idea of synthesis. So it sounds like a very big and fancy word. Don't get thrown off by that. Synthesis is essentially the idea of sort of like coherence or flow, or the idea that both texts or multiple texts that you're looking at are weaved together, sort of like you just put, it's not A, B separate, they're both interconnected and weaved together, right? So you'll often be looking at the same concept through two different lenses. So that's usually how these questions are structured. One sort of similar point or similar device or similar theme, one thing looked at in two different angles or three different angles if you're doing three texts, right? So that's what essentially the comparative essay is. Now, some things about the comparative essay that are most important to remember. Analysis is really important. How well you analyze. So the actual fact of analyzing the different aspects that they're asking you to look at. Structure. Structure is something that we're going to discuss here as well. Structure is how you organize your essay, how it's going to be organized. The idea of a thesis or an argument. I don't know if you guys use this word at A-levels level, this idea of a thesis. A thesis is essentially the idea of what's your hypothesis or what's the argument that you're putting forth in your answer. Because at the end of the day, you are writing an answer to convince someone who is reading your answer that I have understood both these texts. I see this similarity or this connection in them, and this is what I'm trying to say. So it's essentially your voice, and how well your voice comes across, how well your argument comes across logically in your essay is going to decide how well you score and how high your marks are going to be for that. So comparative essays obviously also include an intro and a conclusion and a body context inside it. Okay, so planning the essay. So generally, obviously in your exam questions, the points of comparison for you will be determined. You don't get to choose, and well, sometimes you do. I think sometimes you might get questions like, what are the, I don't know, like choose 3 points of similarity or something. But in general, in your exam questions for A-levels, they seem to give a more of a, somebody decides for you what the points of comparison are, right? So they tell you, okay, here's the point of comparison, comment on religion and religious values. So that's the point of comparison, and you have to take it from there. But in general, when you are not writing for the answers of exam questions itself, when you're studying the text, try to look at the different points of comparison for yourself that somebody else hasn't decided for you. Like, for example, I think like an example that I could give is, for example, like the snowdrop that we were discussing in the snowdrop poems, that use of the color white. That's how, when you're studying the text, try to think of, how does this person use this color white? How is it different from that text that I studied, where white in a white spider was used in a very different way? So how do these compare, right? So get your brains used to that idea of always compare, contrast, compare. It's kind of cool once you get into it too, because your brain is constantly firing up and you're thinking of different angles. So that's something to train yourself in. So when you're planning your essay, try not to compare everything. Obviously, you have limited time. You have to be very specific, very focused, and you pick your best points that will help you to make the most meaningful analysis, okay, for the question. So the next few slides are going to show you some examples of things or elements that you might be required or asked to compare, right? So let's move on and see what those are. So first, Obviously, in your exam questions, you might be asked to compare themes and ideas. They will tell you a theme, or they will ask you to compare themes and ideas in 2 or 3 different texts. So those will incorporate similarities or differences in core themes. So there'll be things like identity. How do these texts look at power? What about the idea of freedom? So these are all themes, right? And then there could be the treatment of moral or ethical or philosophical questions about human experience, like something like what does this have, what are the poems that, or what are the short stories that deal with the ethics of, I don't know, something to do with good or bad, like moral ethics and stuff, right? So those, you can be asked to do themes and ideas. You could be asked to compare context. Okay, this is where the literary eras and the historical context really comes in, because they could ask you to describe how do these different contexts feature in these individual texts. So how does context shape the themes or the characters? And this really interesting point of how meaning can change over time based on context, right? How one thing can mean have a certain meaning in sort of like the neoclassical era, and then by the time you get to the postmodern era, that meaning has completely changed. So how does context change that? Then of course there's the idea of characterization. This mostly comes in novels, in drama, and in short story, like some of the bigger texts, but it's also there in poetry, because poetry has characters sometimes, a lot of the time actually. So the idea of protagonist, antagonist, what is the motivation? Why is this person doing this? How does the development happen? And what are their relationships with each other? And under characterization is also, you often get the representations of gender, of race or class, these identities, human markers, right? So characterize it. Then there's the purpose and message. This could be an element, but I think we generally tend to veer away from the idea of an author's purpose, but we do definitely have the message. Like, what message is this writer trying to convey when he or she writes this text in this manner? What is the intended social message or social critique? And then you look at, okay, how do these different texts have different purposes? Okay, are they the same or are they different? Also, you could be asked to compare perspective and voice. So that's something definitely that they could ask you. What's the perspective of these texts? Okay, what sort of voice comes through? What is the reliability of the narrator? Or how does the point of view shift? Okay, and obviously form and genre is a big thing, but I think maybe form and genre is too broad for A-level style questions, because your ones will be more focused. But in general, this is something to also remember. Because I don't think you really get questions like, compare this short story with this poem and see the similarities or differences, right? It's always text from one particular form in one question. But get used to this as well. Sometimes I tend to do that, because sometimes I read a novel and I think of a song. Or as I see a piece of art, you see a painting, and you're like, didn't I read something very similar to this painting? Weren't they talking about something? So get used to multi-genre, like intermingling different genres and thinking about them, right? So then obviously the style and techniques. This one is really important, because literary devices, uses of imagery, symbolism, irony, how all these things affect the audience, and then the idea of language style. What sort of language is being used, and how does these poetic devices or diction or literary devices, how do they help to convey themes or ideas? These are all things that you guys should train your brains to think about, because we don't know what might come up for the questions at the exam, right? Text structure. This would come most probably for longer texts, like probably novels or sometimes short stories, sometimes drama. But what is the narrative like? Is it non-linear? Is it chronological? Does it go from beginning to start to end? Sometimes does it start from the end and move to the middle, and then, I don't know, go back to the end and then move to the beginning? So what are the different strategic choices that a writer is doing with the text, right? So these uses of flashbacks, framing devices, all of these. Now, literature is a mixed bag. It's a lot of things to think about. And the more things you think about, don't get overwhelmed by it, but just sort of think of it as like a fun game. Like, how do I make connections? Like, how do it'll help your worldview as well, because when you train yourself to look at the world in this way, this is the same principle you will apply. For example, how does a human being in China compare to a human being in, I don't know, Russia? Or how does the global context of war that's happening now, how does it compare to the Cold War that was happening in the 80s? So you will see those points of comparison, right? Not just the obvious things like war is violence, not those, but those subtle dynamics that happen inside of anything that's going on, right? So you could be asked to compare the tone and the mood. And remember, like, for example, Evelyn was a short story where we were really discussing how the emotional atmosphere comes through in a text, right? So when you pick up on something like that, think about it. For example, in Evelyn, we felt that the mood is created really strongly and contributes to the text massively. So think about in your syllabus, what other text can you compare with it? It doesn't necessarily have to be a short story. What about, is there some sort of a drama that creates that same mood? What about a novel? Is there a very atmospheric and deep and heavy sort of atmosphere created in a novel that you study? So look at those little sort of points of connection, right? Setting an atmosphere, again, really important. Physical locations, time periods, and the atmospheres that are conveyed in each text. Okay? And then how does setting sort of shape the narrative? How does it contribute to the themes? Audience response, I don't think this is important and interesting for you guys to think about, but I don't think this will be addressed so much in an exam question. Audience, who are the texts written for, but it helps you to gauge a better understanding of maybe the author's purpose or the social message that the author is trying to convey through these, right? And values and attitudes, again connecting to the author's purpose, the social message. Like, what are the values that I think I'm trying to remember, I was going through one of your past papers and I think there was something that said, like, explore the different attitudes conveyed in two poems, one by a female author and one by a male poet and a female poet, towards something, like towards either gender or religion or something. So what are the different attitudes these authors are bringing out in their texts, right? So those are some different kinds of comparative analysis, like comparative essays that you could be asked to do. So remember, I sent you guys this. I hope Kinori passed it around. But this, I made a sort of Venn diagram for you, and to ease you into this idea of this differences and similarities, compare and contrast. So can I know how many of you were able to fill in some of this? Did you manage to put in some points for these differences in animal crackers and differences in suicide in the trenches, and the similarities? What are the two similarities between the poems? So I would appreciate if you could give me a bit, like dig a bit more and not tell me obvious answers like war is a similarity or violence is a similarity, because that's a broad overarching theme. So that's very clearly there. But what are the like subtle differences? What are the subtle similarities that we have? I will probably come back to this because I'm not going to pause this now and ask you guys, but I hope you did come up with some points for this, which I will be using in the next lesson. So I'm going to come back to this next time when we discuss it. But I put it up there just to show you that general idea of like analysis of compare and contrast using Venn diagrams. So I have put into this slide something that we've already discussed, because those two poems are two that we're going to look at in future, and I would like you to be prepared with it next time when we come for the class to discuss those. But for now, I looked at, because I know the ones who were there with me from the start, we were there, we looked at To a Snowdrop and Design. Those are two poems that we did compare and contrast. So I'm going to show you how these point, like putting them down in point form, just to give you an idea and an example, right? So similarities. So there'll be obviously things that we spoke about. There's the nature theme. There's the use of white imagery. And there are things like, so the similar color, like that color theme that they're using, and imagery that's drawn very much from pastoral, rural, natural environment, and the sonnet form, which were similar. So when you get this kind of a question in your exam, so the first thing you do is connecting points. What are these? What are these? What have I thought of before? Quickly jot them down. Then you look at the differences. So how does this differ? So what are the parts of this text that make it individualistic? So To a Snowdrop is obviously, Wordsworth was a Romantic era poet, believes in idealizing nature, uses white as pure, innocent, and chaste, and nature is shown as a strength of, like, source of strength and resilience, beauty in the ordinary, wonder also, all these, whatever you can think of. It doesn't need to be structured, it doesn't need to be perfect. Every point that comes to your head, just jot it down. And this is while I'm saying this is while you're either reading texts in general or preparing for sort of answering questions at home. You can't go into this much detail at the exam, obviously, but preparing in this way trains your brain to start thinking like this the moment you're in the exam hall and under pressure and time is running out and, oh my god, I only have like 40 minutes to do all this. Okay, so design. Quickly think about the differences. Modern era poet, nature is sinister, white is suddenly fearful, menacing, it's very ominous, it's not the sweet, smooth white that we were talking about. Nature imagery suddenly becomes frightening, it's evil. What does all that point to? Questioning the natural order and disillusionment. So quickly you put the points together. So that's just how to show you how that Venn diagram works, which I'm sure you guys can do for Richard's Animal Crackers and Siegfried's Suicide in the Trenches. So next time I'll look forward to seeing those and we're going to discuss those, okay? So I'm going to move on to just to give you an idea of a comparative essay structure. Okay, so unsure to which extent you've discussed these or been taught these in schools, but I'm just going to tell you in general how a comparative essay structure works. So a comparative essays will generally follow this very basic structure. There's going to be an introduction where generally you introduce the text, the authors, and give a brief context, very brief. It's not supposed to be long, and don't spend so much time on your introduction. And here is where generally you present the thesis. So again, what was a thesis? A thesis is the argument. It's the hypothesis or the kind of like logical reasoning that you are building for argument. So based on what your question is asking you to do, draw from that and put like a one-line thesis. This is what I plan to do. In this answer, I will be analyzing these two texts for this purpose, what the question is asking you to do, right? So then there are going to be the body paragraphs. Obviously, the body paragraphs are going to be your points, where the main points that you have chosen. So for example, you did a compare and contrast here, and say that you had time, okay, say that this is a practice question and this is not, you're not really there at your exam hall, you're doing this at home and you manage to think for like 10-15 minutes and you come up with all of these. Now, can you use all of these in like the answer that you're doing? Obviously no, you don't have the time and you won't be able to make a sort of cohesive and very to the point answer. So you're going to pick 1 or 2 or 3, maximum I would say 3 or 4 points from here that you really feel could drive the point home of the question that's being asked. If the question is asking you something related to nature, you pick the key points that you think are going to best bring out your argument. So now this is no longer about appreciation, this is critical analysis and logic. Logically, also imagine you're like a lawyer. You have to make a case for these two poems. How are you going to convince the judge that your case is correct? So that's what you're looking for. So body paragraphs are going to be your main ideas. So you pick around 3 to 4 main ideas, and essentially I will show you how to sort of structure them into each paragraph of your answer, right? So each of these body paragraphs are going to compare and contrast between these 2 or more texts, and they're also going to give the supporting evidence. So if you're a lawyer, if you're arguing, if you're arguing your case, this is the point where you are putting forward evidence. I believe in this. This is why it happened. This is why I'm saying this. So that's your point of giving your producing your evidence, right? So we will look at this. There are usually 2 approaches to body paragraphs. There are 2 ways that you can write these body paragraphs. They're called integrated approach and block approach. Again, don't be thrown off by these words. They are just random terms that people come up with to describe something. So once you understand all you need to do is grasp what they're telling you to do, and you can just chuck away these terms. So we'll outline some of these in the next slide. And then introduction, body paragraphs, and there's going to be a conclusion. So a conclusion is going to be a summary. In a conclusion, remember, very importantly, do not introduce new points. I know it's sometimes really tempting because I have been there, and sometimes at the end of the answer, you've written the body paragraphs and you're like, but I have this 1 or 2 other really good points. I just squeeze them into the conclusion because I really want to show that I know these as well. Just don't do that. In general, don't introduce new points in the conclusion, no matter how much you want to do it. Just leave those points out. Conclusion should be focused on summarizing what you've already spoken about. If there is any way you can tie in those points even briefly to one of the body paragraphs, do it. But don't introduce it in the conclusion. It's purely there for you to summarize and reinforce what you're trying to say. Okay? So, the block approach. The block approach is an approach where when you're writing the comparative essay, you discuss all of the ideas for one text first, and then you move on to the second text. So it's clearly broken down, it's segregated and separated. First, I will be discussing text A, then I will be discussing text B. Okay? You don't really intermingle the two. You don't you don't acharify the two. You keep them separate, 2 different ingredients. Okay, this is usually an easier choice if you're just getting started with the comparative essay, because for the simple reason, because it's easier to organize. So it's much more easier because then your head is in one track, right? You're like, okay, say that you're analyzing, I don't know, some Shakespearean sonnet. Okay, I'm thinking about Shakespeare. I'm writing what I can remember about Shakespeare for this. So it's easier in that way, but it is less, I would say it's the more bland form. It's not as interesting. It would be, I will show you the integrated approach afterwards. It'll be better if you can try to do that. But if you're just starting off, it's okay to start with the block approach. So just to show you what a block approach is like, let me give you an example of what that's going to look like. So say we're looking at To a Snowdrop and to a frost design. So if we're doing 4 paragraphs, paragraph 1 and 2 are going to be based on To a Snowdrop. So for example, I mean, obviously you're going to expand on these paragraphs. This is just a summary of what the basic point in the paragraph is. So text A, we are looking at paragraph 1 and paragraph 2. Both are looking at text A, which is To a Snowdrop. So first paragraph, we're looking at vivid nature imagery in To a Snowdrop, how the poem shows power and resilience in nature. And then we go on to say, so the color white in the image of snow and the snowdrop in the poem by Wordsworth, it emerges as a symbol for pureness, chastity. So you're discussing everything to do with one text. Okay, one single text. Then we move on to design. We move on to the second text. Okay, this is just in an instance where there are only 2 texts. So by the second text, you start saying, in comparison to text A, this is how text B is similar or different. So you use words like in contrast. Frost also uses vivid nature imagery, but to a different effect, like for example, to highlight the cruelty or the impassiveness or lack of meaning in the natural order. So you talk about your second text after you finish talking about your first text. So that's how the block structure usually works. So again, another paragraph, again connecting to design. So you are not talking about snowdrop here. You're talking. Both of these paragraphs are about design. Both of these first paragraphs are about snowdrop. So there's a clear break. Text A, text B. Okay, so say we're starting from the beginning. Introduction. In this question, I will be analyzing to a snowdrop and design for these things. Okay. Then proceed to the body. Text A, analyze, analyze, analyze. Text B, analyze, analyze, analyze. And then summary. In conclusion, you can clearly see text A is similar or different to text B in these ways. Okay. That's what is called generally a block approach. Okay. And then let's look at what an integrated approach is. So an integrated approach uses a slightly different way of answering. It compares ideas and techniques from both texts in every paragraph. Okay? Now, do you see the difference? In the first one, it's I look at these points in one text, then I look at these points in text number 2. But in the integrated approach, you are putting them both together and looking at them side by side. So that's the difference. Here you will be looking at both texts in each paragraph, and it creates an ongoing dialogue. So I know that this is a little bit more challenging, because the reason why it's challenging is because when you're writing the answer, you can't be thinking text by text. You are thinking both texts at the same time, right? So it's like you have two sets of things in front of you, and at the same time, you're looking at both and you're jotting down your observations, right? But it is the more sophisticated and effective, and this kind of style is going to have a stronger effect in your writing if you can do it. So an example structure. So let me show you how this structure differs to what we were looking at in the block approach. So let me see who I can get. Kinori, can you read the first paragraph for me? Out loud, really loud.
Both to a snowdrop and design explore the power of the natural world, but while Wordsworth's poem portrays nature as a source of hope and renewal, Frost's poem has a more cynical outlook of nature as an ominous force.
Okay, thanks. So do you see how what it's doing? So first we take both the text, we look at the similarity. Both of them explore the power of the natural world, right? But in different ways. So you put you have the but there, and then how do they do? Wordsworth poem explores it in one way, and Frost's one is contrasting. So here is the compare and contrast. So it's really interesting to weave these two together, because as you're writing, more and more things come up and you're like, oh, this is really cool. Like this person is doing this with this there. So it's a sort of woven kind of like a kind of description, right? Can we have, who can I see next? Can I have Tamudita, can we have you read Tamudita, can we have you read the second paragraph?
Drawing parallels between man and the environment, to a snowdrop uses the image of a snowdrop to symbolize strength in adversity, whereas design uses a complex image of white halo, all spider and moth to depict cruelty and creation, morality, and the world order.
Okay, thanks. So again, you can see second paragraph, two texts together. They're both put in. It's not one, we're not looking at only snowdrop or only design, both together. So what we think of a point, now these are just random points I'm thinking of because I don't have an exam question for this, but if it's like drawing parallels between man and environment, we look at what does snowdrop do? To a snowdrop uses the image of a snowdrop to symbolize the strength in adversity, whereas design it also uses nature imagery, but it uses the image of white halo, spider, and moth to depict, instead of strength and like sort of healing power of nature or like something good in nature, design is using it to depict cruelty and question morality, question the world order, question why all of this is happening, right? So again, one paragraph, two texts, but trying to draw on the same ideas and examine them together. Okay, and then paragraph 3, let's have Chantul. I'm picking on the new names that I'm seeing today. Let's have you read the third paragraph, please.
Although each text employs the color white to create a striking image, to a snowdrop uses white in a positive context, while design subverts the color white to connote evil, an unnatural and ominous intent.
Okay, thanks. So again, paragraph 3. What's the key point? Where it's one point we're looking at. We're looking at how the color white is used. Then we look at it in the snowdrop. Then we look at it in the design. So even though snowdrop has it in a different way, design shows it in a different way. It's one point you're looking at. You're looking at the color white. Okay. So there's a connecting point, and then the two different texts are looked at together. So these are two images two approaches that you can practice on your own. See what you're most comfortable with. I wouldn't say one is more right and the other is wrong, or one is better than the other. But if you can get used to the integrated approach, it really gives more strength to your writing. It shows that your sort of reasoning, your logic and your reasoning powers are much more, it gives a more argumentative sort of feel to your text in a good way. Okay. So that's something you can think about. Then, in order to do this, whether you do the block approach or the integrated approach, something that you really, really have to bear in mind is this idea of connectives, what we call connective or connecting words or phrases, right? So regardless of the approach you choose, it is very, very important to use comparative phrases. So connectives are comparative phrases, which are also known as signposts. So you use signposting language. So signposts are these markers. They are the markers in any sort of answer, any text, absolutely essential. Never skimp out or miss writing these. They are the ones that connect the thread of your writing. Okay, so if you have, say that you have different fabric, like paragraph A, paragraph B, intro, conclusion, all of these are different pieces of patchwork in a quilt. So imagine signposts are the thread that you move through each of them to connect them. If you don't have signposting, your essay is just going to be like a bland set of statements. This is that is the, okay, so what? Like, how do they connect? Okay. So signposting is really important because they make it obvious to the marker, whoever's marking your paper, that you are actively comparing and analyzing the relationship between the two texts, not just describing or discussing each text separately. Okay, so even in the block approach, integrated approach is very clear that they're connected because you have two together. But even in the block approach, see, even while you're discussing these, always use in the middle, in contrast, contrasting, similarly, however, I don't know, what were the other words that we had here? Yeah, so likewise, in the same way. So the signposts for use for signifying similarities of comparison are the ones like these. Both texts just as equally, correspondingly alike, similarly, all these ideas of alikeness are called connective phrases or signposting. Okay, and then how do you show difference? A is there, however. B is like this. In contrast, A is so and so, whereas B is so and so. Whereas, unlike, on the other hand, although, conversely. Okay, so really get used to using these words as part of your vocabulary because it's going to be super important in your answers when you're actually writing them. Okay. So then we move on to writing the introduction. Now, remember we spoke about how the introduction is the main paragraph, the first paragraph that you're writing in the essay, before you get to the body where the analysis is going to be. Now, what is important about an introduction is that an introduction is the point where you can put your hook. Now, what is meant by a hook in a reader? A hook is something when you're writing an answer or a comparative essay, it's how you grab the reader's attention. Okay, how it's, I know it's not easy to do it on the spot at the exam, but train yourself while you're writing answers to come up with those kind of hooks so that you are prepared in advance when you go there to actually write stuff, write a hook like that, because it helps your answer to stand out from a generic answer. Like, for example, say that there is an essay question like what we were looking at, like discuss religion, discuss the ideas of religion and morality in 3 different poems. Okay, so instead of starting your essay question with something like the 3 poems by, I don't know, this person and that person and the other, these 3 poems look at religion in this specific way. Instead of getting right to it, what if you start with your opening line something like, religion has long been one of the most contested points in humanity to either draw people together or to separate them. Like something like that. A line that is uniquely yours, something that shows your thinking and your sort of intelligence or your ability to connect things to a world level, something that's unique to you. Like, so I would say, since we were talking about To a Snowdrop and design, if you had a question to do with those two poems, you could start with something like, throughout history, white has long been used as a symbol of purity, chastity, and something signifier of holiness or virtue, like something like that, something that invites the reader to read your, instead of just being like, okay, I'm answering the question. Instead of that, something to give a hook. Like, hook is the best word because it kind of hooks your reader in. Okay, so if you can do this grabbing attention with some sort of a striking observation or a question, even a question is fine. Who is it that decided that white was going to be a color of purity? And then question mark. And then by the time you've written that line, your reader wants to know more. They want to know, okay, what is this guy or girl, what are they trying to say? Okay, so use that hook. The hook is also going to help with your thesis statement, and the give focus to your essays. To the focus of your essay is going to determine what kind of hook that you need. Okay, so after giving that hook, you obviously have to do the introducing your text. So this text by this title, author, and year of publication. Director, script writer, the dramatist. And then immediately you establish the shared connection. Okay, depending on your question, whatever the question you have been given, you explain what links the text. These, very briefly, not in detail, these things are linking the text, and then you give your what is called a thesis statement. It's good if you can practice coming up with these things called thesis statement, because at A-level answers level, I know there are short answers which you're going to be writing in like 40 to 45 minutes. Do you even have that long? It's around 40 minutes, right? I can't even remember now. But during that time, you're writing a short answer. But if you progress to university, if you're going to go to uni as well and continue to do English literature, you're going to have to write proper long essay answers, which are like 5, 6, 7 pages long. And all of them will want you to look at this idea of a thesis statement. Okay, so key argument, your overall argument about what you think the answer is, like this answer to this question is. What is your thoughts? What are your thoughts and views about it? Mention it in the introduction. So it's like you give your argument, then the body of the essay is going to about proving your argument. Here's my argument. Now I'm going to show you how I'm going to prove this argument to you. Okay, again, remember that lawyer metaphor, like that lawyer idea. Okay, And if you can give a brief outline, if you have time, just quickly say this answer is like this essay or answer is going to look at these three key points in the two poems To a Snowdrop and Design. We're going to look at how the color white function, we're going to look at how nature imagery is used, and we're going to look at the relationship between man and the natural world. Those are your three key points. Those 3 points are going to be your paragraph topics, so the key topics of each paragraph that you're writing. Okay. Oh yeah, one thing I want to mention, in the thesis statement, use keywords, okay, from the question. So what have they asked you to do? Are they asking you to look at religion and morality? Make sure you use those two words in your thesis statement, okay? So writing the body paragraphs. So the body paragraphs have this idea of a topic sentence, or what is called a topic sentence, which is the main idea of the paragraph. And this is usually a sub point that is derived from your thesis. Like we were talking before, thesis statement has key points underneath it, which are evidence to your argument. Each of the body paragraphs are going to be one of those key points, okay, a sub point. So then you state your topics and then you compare your text. So if you're using the integrated approach, now here I'm talking about the integrated approach here, you use that and say, first discuss text 1, key scene, quotation, always really important quotation, okay, always pull evidence. So again, I want to drive this home. Answers are all about showing evidence. So in order to show evidence, how do you show that you know something? You can talk about the context of a text and the background of it, but if you need to insert quotations in this point, at this point, this is what is being spoken about, okay? So you look at the key scene or whatever the theme or something that you're looking at, a quotation as evidence, and then you look at the technique and the effects. So similarly, in text 2, you look at either the similarity or the difference in this same point or this same kind of thing that you were talking about, and use those comparative connectors, what we were talking about earlier, the connectives or the connectors or the signposting, those languages. Similarly, in contrast, unlike, always use those. Don't even feel that, okay, I used however before, so I don't want to use this again. It's okay. If you want to use however, I don't know, 30 times in your answer, just use it. Try to use different language, obviously. Practice using different words, but somehow connect your sentences. Don't leave them, as separate entities. Okay, then you present evidence and analysis. You give your quotes or the specific details. You identify the techniques. Is it a metaphor? Is it alliteration? Is there symbols? Are they using conceits? Are they using some sort of, all these different literary devices? You analyze them, you identify them, and then you explain it. Okay, this part is really important because just giving evidence isn't enough. This is where the critical analysis comes in. Just giving evidence would mean you just mention that this is there. So you just give the evidence. But analyzing is where you show how the evidence ties in. This is the evidence. This is how it ties into my argument. Okay, so always look at the how and the why. Two different aspects when you're providing quotations or giving some sort of evidence. How is this done in the text? Why is it done? Why did the author do this? What effect does this have? How is it shaping the meaning? Okay. So that will also pull you into this idea of contextual insight. So if you have time, or if it's required of you in the question, look at the social, historical, or cultural context, like how that also ties in. And always, always, always link back. That's the most important thing in any of your body paragraphs. Link it back. It's not enough for you to just present all the ideas and the analysis and then move on to the next paragraph. No. Before you move on, your last line always has to be linking back. Hence in this paragraph we saw how religion and morality was looked at in these two. Link it back. Find some way to always remember this idea of link back. Okay. So, like I mentioned, this structure is just used for an integrated response, and for a block response, you just do it differently, where you, like we said, we focus on one text per paragraph, but regardless of which you use, always use comparative connectives, okay, the signposting language. Okay, then the conclusion. Okay, which brings us to the idea of the conclusion is also a paragraph. So in any paragraph, the first sentence is what is called the topic sentence. Topic sentence. Now, remember in an introductory paragraph, your before your topic sentence, you get the hook. Okay, if you can do it, try to do it, because it will automatically engage your reader more with what you're writing. So apart from in the introduction, in each body paragraph and in the conclusion, there's the idea of a topic sentence, which is the key sentence that restates the main point you're trying to make. This is your main point. So conclusion also has a topic sentence. The conclusion's topic sentence is going to be a reinstatement of your original thesis statement. Remember, in your introduction, you wrote something. This is what I'm planning to do. This is what I'm attempting to do in this essay. Then by the time you come to the conclusion, then you say, okay, I showed you all these points. Now my job is done. Okay, this is what I tried to say. I have said this. It's again using the lawyer metaphor. You finish with a bang. You're like, I showed you all of this. I hope my point is clear. That's essentially what you're trying to say. So don't repeat your introduction. Don't just repeat what you said in the introduction. Focus on how all this evidence gathers in to prove the point. And basically, you have to somehow convince the reader that my job is done. Basically, I presented my case. You have seen all the evidence, and you should know that everything is basically, there's no argument here. This is the argument. Okay, so then if you have time, quickly summarize the key insights. I looked at these, we saw these, and end with the final statement. Again, this final statement again links back to the key argument and the words from the essay question. Now, I know at least from my experience, I don't know how good you guys are with time management. For me, I always tend to get really short of time for the conclusion, because usually my style is I'm really busy analyzing and writing all the body part, and then by the time it comes to writing the conclusion, I don't have any time left to. So one thing I want to always stress, even if you're super short on time, don't miss out on the conclusion. At least I'm saying 2 to 3 sentences here at most, like if you can manage, but I would say at least a 1 or 2 sentence, hari kamak na, just somehow write a conclusion. Like, thus, all these arguments and through all these evidence and quotations presented, we can see that this is what I was trying to prove. This statement in the essay question, the question that you asked me to prove, I have proven it. Okay, so even if you're really, really short on time, always make time for your conclusion, because that's something that I think we were taught even when we were studying. But I also believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think they take off marks if you don't have your conclusion. So it's okay even if you write less of the body, but somehow conclude, because if not, the answer is just hanging, right? There's no resolution to it. It's just like a half-baked answer. It's hanging there. Even if you've made the best points in the world, if you don't conclude, your answer is half done. Okay, so try to do that somehow. Okay, so then this idea of the Venn diagram, which I said, when you're practicing or when you are doing practice questions, try to get into the idea of this a Venn diagram or some sort of flow chart. Like, always put down your points. Sometimes it used to help to either put down in point form or use arrows. I tended to use arrows a lot when I was writing answers. It would be like, because that's how you remember. You jot down a point and then put arrows. It's like a brainstorming method to show your flow of ideas to yourself. This is before you write the answer, right? So always use some sort of method. It doesn't have to be a Venn diagram, something that works for you, a flow chart, a diagram, point form, something to organize your thoughts while you're doing the comparison. Okay? So Venn diagrams are usually good for quick compare and contrast. Practicing in this method before your exams will help you to train yourself to quickly organize your thoughts during timed exam questions. Okay, so that is that. Then something that I want to say, like just to end off, I think we're a bit early today. It didn't take as long as usual. But some tips is, like we were discussing throughout the presentation, always link your comparisons and your analysis back to the main essay question without a doubt. You might have a lot of things to say, you might have brilliant points, but if you're not linking it back, it doesn't your answer is not cohesive, it's not structured and whole. Okay, it just feels like bits and parts of everything. And keep both or all texts in focus and provide a balanced discussion. So don't, for example, write, I don't know, massive chunks about one text and then include one little line about the other. Like by contrast, Kayla, one sentence like a king. Don't do that. Like try to give equal weight to all the text that you're looking at, as much as possible. And analyze techniques, language features, and literary devices. But like we discussed again, look at the how, but also the why. Don't just say this is there and these things are done in a text, but always think of the why. Why are these devices used? Why did he choose a metaphor here instead of just using a visual image? Like what impact does it have? Okay, always look at the why. And extremely important, use integrated direct evidence, which is your quotations. I can't stress this enough. You have to know your quotations, and don't think of it as a sort of overwhelming, scary thing either. Just try to find chunks, like little parts of the text that really interest you. This is me saying because I'm someone who doesn't really believe in this very exam oriented kind of style of learning. I believe that you should do well in exams, obviously, but I think you should do things for the pleasure of it, for the beauty of it, especially a subject like literature, because if not, you use the whole value of what you're learning. So when you're reading through your text, don't just study things for exams, being like, make question like answer and like I should have these quotations or something. Try to pick out interesting quotes that stick in your mind. That way you can memorize them easier. Like a really interesting line or a really weird image in a short story or a part of a dramatic text that really stuck with you, and then like memorize things that are important to you or feel important in an exciting way. Okay, I'm gonna tell you something from back when I was doing my A levels, which was a while back, but I'm just giving you an example to show you how that sort of comparison helps. We had Macbeth for our drama for theater. We had to do Macbeth as a play, and for some reason, I can't think of Macbeth the poem without thinking of Coldplay's Viva La Vida. I don't know how many of you guys have heard that song, but for me, when I was learning Macbeth back in school, that song is always playing in the back of my head. So because the similarities are very, like, even if you take the lyrics, if you're familiar with the song, if not, just if you ever hear it, it's all about a person who set out to achieve the world and thought that power and friends and all of these were going to be with him, but how his world came crumbling down, right? So use these kind of similarities, and again, this may be a controversial sort of like approach to it, but I think that incorporating those external linkages in an exam answer actually works. Like I said, this may be contrary to popular opinion. I know that teachers and examiners, they want you to focus simply on the text that you're doing and absolutely draw only from those things. But I personally think that you can pull it into the text if you have time. That gives your answer that much weight. And I'm trying to tell you guys this from my personal experience, because I can tell you is that twice for my A levels I got A's, and I used to do this, so I'm hoping that it was a good thing, and I'm hoping that that's what got this sort of hook for the reader and maybe extra marks or good scores. But try to make your answers interesting. Use quotations from the text, incorporate them, but also try to don't do it in a systematic, dry, and very cut and paste manner. Try to be dynamic. Try to be cool is the word that I can think of. Like, try to find ways to make your answers kind of cool and exciting for somebody to read. Because always remember, your examiners are coming to your papers reading hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of exam questions that are all very much alike, that all discuss the same, in the same structure, in the same themes, in the same way. So even the examiners are a bit tired out, right, by the time they get to your paper. So if you can, like I said, if you can find a hook, that little thing that will just grab their interest a little bit more, it'll help your answer. And how you do that is up to you. You have to decide and kind of explore and experiment, but just something to keep in mind. So, like I said, use specific quotations, and finally, write with clarity and precision. Most important. Know your point, know what you're going to say, focus on it and write it. Try your best not to ramble. I know it's not as easy as it sounds. Sometimes when we're writing, we want to put everything together and write about a lot of things, and because our ideas are overflowing in our head, right? But this is why it's so important to take the extra time to organize thoughts, because even if it takes you, again, this is me speaking from personal experience, even if it takes you 3 to 4 to 5 minutes to first organize your thoughts and jot them down and do the brainstorming and the mapping, do that first, because those 5 minutes will be 100 times more beneficial in the whole construct of your answer than if you just jumped into the answer straight and to save those 5 minutes, Kayla just started writing straight away. Don't do that. Brainstorm. Absolutely brainstorm, and use some sort of a diagram and map your brain so that you can, when you're writing the answer, you can refer to those points and keep focus. Or how do you say it? Like a track ke but don't fall out of the track. Like, just go straight in one direction. Okay. So that's something that I really want to stress. Yeah, it's interesting because as I was preparing for this and as I was kind of throwing this together, I looked around and I saw some of your kids, your people your age were asking around online, what are the best ways to score an A in literature, because it's really difficult to get A's in English literature and they don't easily give it, and all this jazz, right? I don't think there is one set way. I don't think there is a direct method or a direct one answer to it. But again, from personal subjective experience, what I can tell is always quality over quantity. It doesn't matter if you write 3 or 4 pages of long answers with all the things in the world. If you are not writing with, like I said, clarity and precision, preciseness, clarity, it's okay even if your answer is short. And this is me telling you guys, I'm, again, my personal opinion, I'm not a fast writer at all. Most I have ever been able to write for an exam paper is 1 page and a quarter, or maybe maximum 1.5 pages if I'm really lucky, because I'm a very slow writer. But within those 1.5 pages, if you have these sections that we spoke about, introduction, body paragraphs with your main points, key arguments, thesis statement, if you stay on track, stay focused, and you conclude with just 1 or 2 lines, it's fine. It doesn't matter that your answer is short. You will get the marks because your thought process has been clear and structured. Structure is really important. I mean, by all means, if you guys can write a lot, write. I mean, I'm not discouraging you from it. I'm just saying length doesn't decide the quality of your answer. Okay? So you don't have to write as much as possible. Write short, write sweet, write precisely. And Always put yourself in the mindset of a lawyer. You have limited time to prove something. How are you going to prove this to the best of your ability? Very quickly. Okay, you don't have time to ramble and go into descriptions and all of that. Precise. Okay, so just telling you guys all of that. Avoid unnecessary rambling. Try your best. Always remember quality over quantity. Don't focus on length, focus on the quality of your writing. Okay, and then I want to ask, have you guys heard of the peel technique? Have you heard of peel? Do you know what peel is? Somebody, let's see, somebody who hasn't spoken today. Let's see. I see my old usuals. Metuli, Setuki, Tisuri, have any of you heard of the peel technique? Anyone?
No.
Nobody's heard of peel? Okay, so this is something for you guys to remember then. I'm gonna tell you what the peel technique is, and this is something I want you to keep in mind as a visual image. I'm very big on visual images. As you can see, I'm all about connecting visual imagery and coming up with ideas and images. So keep this in mind as a way how you're supposed to answer a question. Any analysis, comparative analysis, or essay type questions, there is a technique called the peel, which is when you're writing the answer. You show your point, you show your evidence, you evaluate the evidence. So point, evidence, evaluation, link back to the question. Okay, very simple, very, very clear, and not a complex thing to remember. And how I always visualize this is any answer, any sort of exam based question that you have. Imagine that you're peeling an orange. You have an orange in front of you and you have to get to the core of the orange. So how you get to it is you do it layer by layer. You show your point, evidence, you evaluate the evidence, again bringing us back to how and why. So evidence is the how, right? So evidence is how has it been done? How does this quotation, like, show the quotation as evidence, but just showing evidence isn't enough. Evaluate it. Imagine you're in a crime scene. So you're a detective and you've come to the crime scene, and there is a pool of blood with 3 cat hairs in that pool of blood, right? So if you just take a photo of that and say that, okay, there's a pool of blood with 3 cat hairs, then you go and tell your chief detective or your whatever crime investigator chief, he's going to be like, so what? Okay, so what are you saying with this? So you have the pool of blood with the 3 cat hairs, then you evaluate, how did these 3 cat hairs get there? Why are they there? How did they get there? Who put them there? How was a cat in this crime scene? What is this cat trying to tell us? Was the cat trying to point out who the murderer was? Is he trying to show what the victim was last doing before they died? So evaluation, very, very important. So peel, again, I'm telling you, point, evidence, evaluation, link back to the question, back again. Don't ever forget the L and just do P, okay? You can't end at P. Whether you're doing your conclusion or even a paragraph, do not end at P. Always do the L and go to the peel, okay? So there's your technique, and that's what you should do. Okay, finally, 2 things to keep in mind that I've already mentioned to you, but I'm stressing it again. Take those 4 to 5 minutes to brainstorm. It is worth it. It is absolutely worth it. Do not think that I can just map this out in my brain. I don't really need to write these things down. Don't do it, because guaranteed the thoughts that come to your brain when you first see the question, those points, you think you will remember them, but as you're writing the question, you're going to forget them because you are overwhelmed with so much information, right? You won't remember, and then your essay will lose focus and you're going to be all over the place. So even if you have 40 to 45 minutes for an answer, I don't know how much time you have, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, whatever it is, take 4 to 5 minutes to first brainstorm. Venn diagram, point form, flow chart, some sort of a way, organize your answer. Do not start writing without first jotting down and organizing your points. Okay. Then finally, take 2 to 3 minutes to write out the conclusion. Like I said, even if it's just a couple of lines, wrap up your answer. Don't leave it at P, put it to the L and peel the question. Peel, like always focus on peel. Okay, so I think I drove that point home well and strong enough. So that brings me to the end of what I wanted to tell you guys. Do any of you have questions for me? Or anything that you want clarified as usual? Anything else you'd like to know? Or was it clear? Was everything clear enough to understand? Yeah, I'm gonna take that as a yes. Do you guys want to tell me how was this similar to the sort of structures that you guys already follow? Or were you taught, or do you currently follow a different way in writing your answers? Any of you? Let's have Kinuri give us some ideas. Kinuri?
It's more detailed than what you told us. But
Okay, and yeah, how do you usually structure your answers when you're writing? Is it the same format, or how do you usually write?
it has some of the features, but it's kind of more messy than, like, not very organized.
Yeah. And do you guys do brainstorming? I hope you do. Do you do brainstorming before writing your answers?
To some extent.
Okay, it can't be to some extent from now onwards. Remember, it's a crucial part. Absolutely don't miss on it. So I hope you guys take that away from this. And yeah, remember that it's going to be a integral part of your essay before you start anything else. Thisuri and Satuki, I haven't heard from you guys today. Is this how you are used to writing your essay type answers? Did you learn anything new? Is anything confusing? Thisuri, Satuki, very quiet today. Okay, the girls aren't answering. What about Tamudita and Shantul? What about you guys? Was it clear? Was there anything you wanted clarified?
Your session was really helpful, and it was. I usually use the peel method to a certain extent, but I grabbed some points from this session, and I am gonna use it in future. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Oh, of course, you're welcome. That's great to hear. So I hope this was helpful, and as usual, I'll try my best to put it up on YouTube so you can go back and refresh your memories and look into these as well. And like I always say, just because there is one way of, like, somebody tells you that this is a good way to do things, don't just follow that. Even if I say it or anybody, don't just follow that. Find for yourself. Like, you guys are the internet generation. You guys are the tech babies. Like, go online, Google up stuff, like, read other people's answers, read opinions, get more informed. We live in the age of information. So, and also try to be creative as much as possible. Like I said, think of hooks, think of ideas that you can pull from different places, and find ways to make your answer original. That's the final sort of tip that I can give you guys, final advice that I can give. Try your best to make your answers original, and trust me, if you can give a quality answer over a quantity wise long answer, the quality is definitely going to speak for itself, and you will get the grades and you'll get the scores. So good luck and happy practicing. And I know you have like 4 or 5 months left to get ready, so not to scare you, but yeah, start practicing and writing your answers, and good luck with everything. Okay, I am gonna end this now. I will see you guys at the next session then. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All
Thank you
right.
so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Okay. See you guys next time. Bye.